There's a strange moment that comes before every true change, and most people miss it because nothing outside has moved yet. The bills still look the same. The inbox still looks the same. The body may still carry the old tension in the shoulders, the same tight jaw, the same silent question. When will it finally happen? But in the old temples, in the quiet schools where names like Thoth were not treated as myth but as instruction, this invisible moment was considered the real beginning. Not the contract signed, not the account balance rising, not applause. The beginning was internal. The beginning was energetic. The beginning was a decision so quiet and so complete that reality had no choice but to reorganize around it. Most people are taught the opposite. They're trained to wait for proof, then permit themselves to feel secure. They wait for the partner, then permit themselves to feel loved. They wait for the money, then permit themselves to feel powerful. They wait for results, then permit themselves to feel rich. But that sequence keeps the soul chained to circumstance. It gives power to delay. It makes your emotional life a servant of events, and events are always late by nature. They move through time. They lag. They gather causes you cannot see. So if your heart waits for evidence, your state is always behind your own becoming. The old wisdom flips that order with a kind of sacred audacity. Feel rich first, not as fantasy, not as denial, but as alignment. Feel resourced before resources become visible. Feel held before life feels soft. Feel like a creator before your world reflects it. This is not pretending the storm is not there. This is choosing where your authority lives while the storm passes. Imagine standing in a dim chamber lit by oil flame. Stone walls, still air, the scent of resin and dust. A figure sits before a low table, and on that table is a scale, not for judging morality, but for weighing coherence. On one side, your desire. On the other, your dominant state. If desire says abundance, but state says panic, the scale tilts and manifestation stalls. If desire says expansion, but state says unworthiness, the scale tilts and opportunities slip through your fingers like water through a fist. In this symbolic chamber, Thoth is not merely a god of writing or magic. He is the keeper of proportion, the architect of inner law. He teaches that form follows frequency, and frequency follows identity. Identity is the hidden engine. It is the statement beneath all statements. Not what you say once in a journal, but what you repeatedly assume in the dark. Identity sounds like this: I am always behind. I always have to struggle. Nothing works for me unless I exhaust myself. People with money are different from me. If that is the seed text in the subconscious, then even when opportunities arrive, you may sabotage them quietly. You may underprice your work, delay that email, avoid that room, mistrust that ally, overthink that leap. Then you call it bad luck. But from the esoteric view, it is not bad luck, it is fidelity. You are being loyal to an old internal script. And this is where inner wealth begins, not with positive slogans, but with radical script revision. The script of lack says, I will believe when I see. The script of inner wealth says, I will become so seeing can catch up. To a modern mind, this can sound airy until life gives you a hard example. Think of two people with the same current resources. Same city, same industry, similar skill level. One moves like someone apologizing for taking up space. Their decisions are cautious, fragmented, reactive. They interpret silence as rejection, feedback as insult, delay as doom. The other moves with grounded calm. Not arrogance, not denial, a quiet sufficiency. They follow up without shame. They ask clear questions. They invest in quality before they are ready. They take care of their body as if it matters. They refuse cheap chaos. Over a year, their external results diverge dramatically. Why? Because one had more luck? Sometimes, perhaps. But often because one had more coherence. Their inner economy was not in deficit. Inner economy is a useful phrase. You understand outer economy. income, spending, investment, debt. Inner economy follows similar laws. Attention is currency. Emotion is liquidity. Belief is credit. Identity is your central bank. If your attention is constantly spent on fear, if your emotions are frozen in resentment, if your belief system issues only debt-based stories, I owe life proof of suffering before I deserve relief, your inner economy collapses long before your outer one does. And when inner economy collapses, abundance cannot stay. It may visit, but it will not remain. So what does it mean, practically, to feel rich before results show up? It does not mean shopping to impress people. It does not mean forcing fake gratitude while panic burns in your chest. It does not mean bypassing real pain. It means you begin to generate the emotional and psychological qualities of wealth independent of current numbers. You cultivate sufficiency, dignity, stewardship, openness, and trust in process. You stop rehearsing catastrophe as your primary meditation. Rehearsing catastrophe is one of the most expensive habits in human life. The mind predicts loss to feel prepared, but in excess, it becomes ritualized poverty. You wake and check for danger. You scan conversations for hidden threat. You interpret neutral events negatively. You create a world that confirms your suspicion. Ancient schools would call this enchantment, except not the kind you want. A spell is simply sustained attention with emotional charge. Most people are casting lack spells daily and calling it realism. Thoth's code interrupts that spell with a question sharp as a blade. What state are you authoring right now in this breath? Notice the word authoring. In Egyptian symbolism, writing is sacred because inscription shapes reality. To write inwardly is to imprint patterns into the subtle body. Every repeated sentence becomes hieroglyph. Every emotional rehearsal becomes law. So if your inner inscription reads, "I am unsupported," your nervous system organizes around defense. If it reads, "I am entrusted with resources," your system organizes around stewardship and perception opens. There is also a moral confusion many people carry. They secretly believe that to feel rich before results is selfish or delusional. But real inner wealth is not vanity. It is responsibility. A depleted person cannot serve well for long. A resentful creator cannot create cleanly. A fearful leader cannot lead clearly. When you stabilize yourself in sufficiency, your actions become less manipulative. You no longer beg energy from others. You no longer try to control outcomes by force. You become less hungry for validation and more available for contribution. That is not selfish. That is mature power. And yes, there is mystery in this, because when your state changes, life often responds in ways too precise to call coincidence. You meet the right person on a day you almost stayed home. A stalled project opens after you release desperation. Money comes through an unexpected channel after you stop gripping one specific path. Skeptics call it selective attention. Mystics call it resonance. Perhaps both are true. Either way, the principle stands. The field around you reflects the pattern within you more than the words you post about it. The problem is that most people try this for 3 days. They breathe deeply, repeat affirmations, feel better, then check reality like an impatient investor. Where is it? Why hasn't it happened yet? When results do not instantly appear, they collapse back into old identity and conclude the method failed. But this is like planting a seed and digging it up every morning to check roots. The interruption is the sabotage. The distrust is the drought. Inner wealth asks for continuity. Not intensity, continuity. A steady return, again and again, to the state you choose to inhabit. You may wobble. Everyone wobbles. The point is not perfection. The point is sovereignty. You notice fear without becoming it. You feel uncertainty without kneeling to it. You make decisions from your chosen identity more often than from your inherited panic. This is where grandeur enters, not as decoration, but as depth. Grandeur is what you feel when you remember you are not a random accident reacting to noise, but a conscious participant in a living cosmos. In that remembrance, your daily actions stop being trivial. The way you answer a message becomes ceremonial. The way you handle money becomes ritual. The way you speak to yourself becomes invocation. You begin to live as if your inner chamber matters, because it does. The unseen architecture determines the scene building. Picture dawn over desert stone. Cool wind, pale light, long shadows stretching like script across the ground. A scribe kneels with reed and ink, not to record what has happened, but to declare what shall be held true. This is your practice now, not as theater, as precision. Each morning, before the world tells you who to be, you decide your internal law. I am resourced. I'm guided. I move with dignity. I steward what I have and welcome what grows. I do not worship delay. I do not bargain with fear. I do not outsource my state to circumstance. Then the day begins. Challenges come, of course. A payment is late. A plan shifts. Someone misunderstands you. The old script tries to reclaim territory. See? Nothing changed. But now there is space between stimulus and identity. You can respond as the one who is already inwardly wealthy. You solve, communicate, adapt, and continue. This is the moment most people miss. The moment where inner wealth proves itself, not in meditation, but in friction. Your state under pressure is your true altar. Over time, a subtle confidence appears. Not loud confidence, not performance confidence, root confidence. You stop chasing every shiny method because you trust process. You stop speaking from desperation because you trust value. You stop performing scarcity to belong. Your nervous system softens, creativity returns, decisions sharpen. And then, often quietly at first, results begin to mirror the shift. Better collaborations, cleaner income, fewer chaotic losses, more meaningful momentum. Not because the universe was bribed, but because you became congruent. Congruence is wealth. When what you desire, what you believe, what you feel, and what you do all align, force becomes unnecessary. You're no longer trying to drag life uphill. You're moving with current, not against it. Ancient language might call this mod. Right order, balance, truth in action. In modern terms, it is psychological coherence with spiritual gravity. And here is the final secret of this first gate. Feeling rich before results is not a trick to get things. It is the thing. The external gains are beautiful and welcome, yes, but they are fruits, not roots. The root is freedom from emotional dependence on timing. The root is remembering that your worth is not on layaway. The root is living from sufficiency now. So when abundance arrives, it meets a vessel capable of holding it without fear. Because many people can attract more, far fewer can hold more. Holding requires identity. Holding requires nervous system capacity. Holding requires the ability to remain grounded when life expands. Inner wealth builds that capacity before expansion, so expansion does not break you. So stand in your own inner chamber tonight. Even if the room is small, even if the day was difficult, even if the numbers are not where you want them, stand and choose your inscription. Choose what law you live by. Choose what state you author. Let the old script fall from your tongue like dust from an ancient wall. The code is simple and it is demanding. Become first. Receive second. Not because reality is cruel, but because reality is precise. And precision, when honored, becomes grace. Once you begin to sense that inner wealth is real, a second mystery appears almost immediately, and it is uncomfortable because it is intimate. If abundance is possible, what keeps so many people trapped in patterns of lack, even while opportunities circle around them? Why do some lives feel like open doors while others feel like corridors that narrow each year? Why does one person receive, expand, and circulate value, while another, equally intelligent, equally sincere, keeps repeating the same chapter with different names? The old esoteric schools would answer with a word modern language has nearly forgotten how to use carefully. Spell. Not fantasy, not superstition, A spell is sustained perception hardened into reality by repetition and emotion. It is a pattern of seeing that becomes a pattern of being. If you look long enough through the lens of "I am unsupported," your body begins to carry unsupported posture. Your choices begin to echo unsupported logic. Your relationships begin to mirror unsupported assumptions, and you will call the whole thing fate. But it was a lens. This is the poverty spell of perception. Not merely lack of money, but lack as a worldview. Lack as identity. Lack as a nervous system religion. In mythic language, this spell often appears as a fog. Travelers enter it and lose direction. They walk in circles, insisting the world has no paths. In psychological language, the same process is selective attention under threat. Your brain, designed to protect you, prioritizes danger signals and filters out neutral or beneficial data. This mechanism can save your life in true emergency. But if it becomes your default mode, it quietly destroys your life in ordinary time. You stop seeing the openings that do not look dramatic. You stop trusting possibilities that require patience. You mistake familiarity for truth. This is why two people can witness the same event and extract opposite futures from it. A delayed response to an email means "they hate me, I knew it" to one mind, and "people are busy, I'll follow up clearly tomorrow" to another. A temporary financial dip means "I'm doomed, this always happens" to one, and adjust, simplify, adapt, continue to another. The event is identical. The world interpreted is different, and interpretation, repeated, becomes environment. Thoth's wisdom here is mercilessly clear. Perception is not passive. Perception is creative participation. You are not just observing reality. You are selecting which reality to reinforce through attention. The eye is not a camera. The eye is a ritual instrument. If that sounds too poetic, let's ground it in the body. Perception is not only mental, it is somatic. Scarcity has a posture. It curls, contracts, rushes, and braces. Shoulders rise, breath shortens, voice tightens, decisions become defensive, time feels hunted. In that state, you cannot think as well as you believe you can. Your prefrontal clarity narrows. You become reactive and call it practical. You overcommit from fear, undercharge from fear, isolate from fear, then consume content about abundance while your body keeps broadcasting emergency. The message never lands because the receiver is locked in alarm. And this is one reason motivational language often fails people. It tries to overwrite cognition without addressing embodiment. You can repeat, "I am abundant" all day, but if your nervous system hears, "we are in danger," your behavior will obey the body, not the slogan. So where does this poverty spell begin? Often long before adult decisions. It begins in atmospheres, in family tone, in the sentences that floated through childhood kitchens and back seats. Money doesn't grow on trees. People like us don't get ahead. Don't get your hopes up. Be realistic. Stop dreaming. None of these phrases are evil by themselves. Some were spoken to protect, but repeated without consciousness, they become inherited commandments. The child does not evaluate them. The child absorbs them. Years later, the adult calls them personality. Then culture adds another layer. Entire systems profit from your insecurity. Advertising can thrive by manufacturing deficiency. Social media can intensify comparison until your baseline self feels inadequate by design. News cycles can train your attention toward crisis until possibility feels naive. Again, none of this requires conspiracy to be powerful. It only requires repetition. The mind that repeatedly consumes insufficiency begins to produce insufficiency internally. By the time someone says, "just think positive," they are addressing the tip of an iceberg with a candle. The deeper work is archaeological. You descend and ask, whose voice is this thought? When I panic about money, what ancient sentence awakens? When I withhold myself, what old punishment am I avoiding? When opportunity appears, what identity feels threatened by accepting it? This is not blame. This is liberation through accurate seeing. You cannot dissolve a spell you refuse to name. In temple symbolism, naming had power because to name was to differentiate essence from appearance. If a shadow was named incorrectly, it ruled you. If named correctly, it lost force. The same is true psychologically. I am broken keeps you hypnotized. I am running inherited scarcity scripts under stress opens a door. One is identity collapse. The other is workable pattern recognition. A subtle but important turn happens here. Many people discover scarcity conditioning and become angry at their past, their family, society, or themselves. Some anger is natural. But if anger becomes identity, it creates a new prison. You replace "I am unlucky" with "I am wounded." And while the second may feel more sophisticated, both can freeze motion if over-identified. Thoth's path does not worship pain or deny pain. It transcribes pain into wisdom and then demands movement. Movement begins with attention discipline. Remember, attention is currency. Where you spend it, reality thickens. If most of your attention goes to what is missing, missing will become emotionally dominant even in times of growth. This does not mean denial of problems. It means proportionality. Address problems directly, then return attention to possibility, skill, relationship, and action. Solve and shift. Don't solve and spiral. One practice ancient and modern minds both respect is evidence revision. Scarcity mind says, "Nothing ever works for me." Instead of arguing abstractly, gather concrete counter-evidence. Times you solved difficult problems, people who helped you, skills you learned, moments you created value, even small wins that felt ordinary. Scarcity hates specifics. It thrives on vague absolutes. Precision breaks enchantment. Another layer of the poverty spell is identity loyalty within social groups. This is rarely discussed honestly. Sometimes people remain small because expansion threatens belonging. If your environment mocks ambition, mistrusts success, or equates struggle with virtue, your subconscious may sabotage growth to preserve relational safety. You may say you want wealth, but at a deeper level you fear exile. So you dim yourself strategically and call it humility. This is where inner wealth demands courage. You must become willing to be misunderstood in transition. Not forever, not by everyone, but enough to keep your soul intact while your identity updates. There's grief in this. You may outgrow conversations that once felt like home. You may lose the role of the one who always needs help, and some people, accustomed to your old shape, may resist your new posture. Let that be part of the rite. Every real initiation asks for a relinquishment. Perception also governs time, and scarcity distorts time brutally. In scarcity, everything feels late or urgent. You either feel behind or panicked. Both states reduce intelligent action. You chase shortcuts, abandon long games, and make choices that soothe anxiety now but cost you later. Inner wealth restores temporal dignity. You begin to think in seasons, not moments. You stop judging seeds for not being fruit within a week. You respect compounding. You make decisions your future self can inhabit without shame. This temporal correction may be the single most profitable spiritual skill in modern life. Now, let's descend even deeper into language. Language is perception made audible. Listen to how scarcity speaks through a person. "I can't afford that" is sometimes true, but often used as a full stop. "People never pay me well." "This market is impossible." "It's too late." "Someone like me can't do that." These statements are not neutral observations. They are performative commands. They narrow imagination. They close strategy. They instruct the nervous system to retreat. Inner wealth language does not lie, but it reopens agency. "That's not in my budget yet." What would make it possible? How can I increase value and visibility? What's one move I can make this week? Who has done this from a similar starting point? What standard do I need to raise to match my aim? These questions shift perception from fatalism to authorship. And authorship changes behavior long before results confirm it. You can feel the difference in your body right now. Fatal statements collapse breath. Authoring questions create space. There's also a spiritual dimension often misunderstood: gratitude. In scarcity culture, gratitude is sometimes weaponized to suppress desire. Be grateful and stop wanting more. But authentic gratitude is not anti-desire. It is anti-amnesia. It remembers existing resources so desire can arise from fullness rather than hunger panic. Gratitude says, I honor what is here, and I remain available for what is next. This dual stance, content and creative, is the signature of mature abundance. At this point, the poverty spell begins to crack, but one more veil remains: moral confusion about wealth itself. Some people unconsciously associate wealth with corruption, greed, betrayal, or spiritual compromise. If these associations remain unexamined, they will repel money as a self-protection strategy. The psyche says, if wealth equals danger, I choose safety over abundance. Again, this is often unconscious and therefore powerful. To heal this, you need a new moral blueprint: wealth as stewardship. Wealth as capacity to protect time, support family, fund beauty, back truth, and reduce avoidable suffering. Wealth as an amplifier of values already present. If your values are clean, amplification can serve the good. Without this reframe, many people unconsciously ensure they never receive enough to test their ethics at scale. As perception purifies, something majestic returns: discernment. Discernment is not cynicism. It is clear seeing without collapse. You can notice risk without worshiping fear. You can evaluate offers without suspicion addiction. You can walk through a noisy world and keep your inner signal intact. This is spiritual adulthood. This is psychological sovereignty. And once perception changes, your calendar changes, your conversations change, your collaborations change, your standards change. You begin to decline what drains your future. You begin to choose environments that normalize growth. You begin to make fewer dramatic promises and more consistent moves. The drama decreases. The power increases. From the outside, this can look almost boring at first. Fewer emotional spikes, fewer crisis narratives, more follow-through, more patience. But under that apparent simplicity, a magnificent structure is rising. You're no longer living as a leaf in weather. You are becoming climate. In mythic terms, you have stepped out of the fog and regained the star map. The sky was always there, but now you can read it. Constellations of cause and effect emerge. You see how one thought became one emotion, became one decision, became 1 year. You also see how one corrected thought can become one stabilizing breath, one wise choice, one new direction, one different year. Destiny stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like participation. This is the threshold to the next gate. Because once the poverty spell of perception loosens, you are left with a terrifying and beautiful freedom. If I am not doomed by my past lens, then I am responsible for the lens I wear now. That responsibility is heavy for a moment. Then it becomes exhilarating. Because if perception is creative participation, then every breath is a chance to vote for a different life. And in that realization, quietly, magnificently, inner wealth stops being concept and becomes command. When a spell begins to break, you do not immediately feel triumphant. You feel raw. You notice how often old reactions still rise, how quickly the body remembers panic, how familiar it is to contract when uncertainty appears. This is not failure. This is revelation. You're finally seeing the machinery while it runs. And once you can see it, you can work with it. This is where the path turns from philosophy into alchemy. Alchemy, in its deepest sense, was never only about turning metal into gold. It was about turning unconsciousness into conscious force, turning reactivity into authority, turning scattered energy into directed will. In a language we're walking with now, It is the disciplined art of governing your feeling state so your identity does not get outsourced to circumstance. Most people think feelings happen to them. Ancient initiatory training taught the opposite. Feelings move through you, but state is cultivated by you. State is the climate beneath the weather. Emotions are waves. State is the oceanic quality that holds them. If your state is sovereignty, fear may still visit, but it does not become king. If your state is scarcity, even good news can feel unstable. So the question is no longer, how do I never feel anxiety again? The question becomes, how do I become the one who can meet anxiety without surrendering identity? Begin with the breath, not because it is trendy, but because breath is the fastest bridge between story and biology. Scarcity breath is shallow, rapid, upper chest, interrupted. It tells the nervous system, danger now. Sovereign breath is slower, fuller, grounded lower in the body, with a slightly longer exhale than inhale. This pattern does not solve your entire life, but it changes your processing window in minutes. It returns blood flow to clear thinking. It decreases compulsive reaction. It gives you back the pause where choice lives. There's an old inner instruction you can use. Lengthen the exhale, lengthen the future. Because when you exhale fully, your system reads time differently. Urgency loosens. You stop trying to solve your entire destiny in one terrified hour. Pair breath with posture. Yes, posture. Spiritual people sometimes ignore this because it sounds too simple. But the body is not separate from the psyche. It is the psyche made visible. Collapse the chest, lower the gaze, clench the jaw, and your mind generates matching narratives. Lift gently through the spine, soften the face, relax the belly, plant the feet, and new narratives become available. Not magically, but measurably. You cannot think like a steward while physically bracing like prey. Then comes language, the inner script that either binds or liberates. In moments of stress, do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" That question usually recruits victim logic and historical pain. Ask instead, "What is being asked of me here?" That shift moves you from accusation to initiation. It transforms event into training. It reminds you that difficulty can be data, not verdict. Another useful sentence. This sensation is real. This prophecy is optional. Anxiety will present sensations, tightness, heat, restlessness, and instantly attach a story of doom. You honor the sensation without obeying the prophecy. You ground the body, then choose thought deliberately. Now we enter imaginal command, one of the most misunderstood arts. Many people treat imagination as escapism. In inner work, imagination is rehearsal for embodiment. Elite performers in athletics, music, and leadership use mental rehearsal because the nervous system responds to vivid internal simulation. Esoteric practice knew this long before neuroscience language existed. If you repeatedly imagine yourself failing, apologizing, shrinking, you are training collapse pathways. If you repeatedly imagine yourself responding with steadiness, clarity, and dignity, you are installing success pathways. The key is specificity. Do not imagine abstract riches floating from the sky. Imagine the exact moments where your old state usually breaks and rehearse a new response. See yourself receiving a delayed payment notification and staying composed while you execute Plan B. See yourself entering an important conversation with open chest and clear voice. See yourself naming your fee without flinching. See yourself declining misaligned offers without guilt. This is not fantasy. This is identity training under simulated pressure. Use sensory detail. What does the room feel like? What is your breathing rhythm? Where are your shoulders? What words do you choose? The more detailed the rehearsal, the more familiar the behavior becomes when reality arrives. Familiarity reduces fear. Reduced fear improves decisions. Better decisions create better outcomes. That is alchemy in sequence. There is also the ritual of emotional transmutation. People here transmute and imagine suppressing feelings. Not all. Transmutation begins with full permission. Feel what is present without dramatizing it into identity. Fear can be felt as energy, heat, movement, contraction, without the sentence, "I am doomed." Sadness can be honored without, "I am powerless." Anger can be channeled into boundary and action instead of self-sabotage. The formula is simple, not easy. Feel, name, breathe, choose. Feel, locate the sensation in the body. Name, fear is here, not I am fear. Breathe, lengthen exhale, reduce urgency. Choose, one aligned action from your wealth identity. Notice what this does. It keeps emotion moving rather than freezing it into character. At this stage, many people ask silently, but what if my external reality is genuinely hard right now? Then sovereignty matters even more. Feeling state mastery is not a luxury for easy seasons. It is survival intelligence for hard seasons. When resources are tight, your clarity is an asset. Your calm is an asset. Your relational integrity is an asset. Panic burns these assets first. This is why the ancients linked wealth with discipline, not indulgence. Discipline here does not mean harshness. It means devoted consistency to practices that protect your state. Morning grounding before screens. Intentional movement to discharge stress. Focus blocks for meaningful work instead of chaotic multitasking. Conscious media diet to prevent fear saturation. Clean sleep boundaries. These are not productivity hacks. They're sovereignty rituals. They keep your inner throne occupied by the right ruler. And yes, sovereignty requires boundaries. Many people leak state through porous boundaries. Constant access, people-pleasing, over-explaining, taking on everyone's panic as proof of being good. But generosity without boundaries becomes depletion, and depletion breeds resentment, and resentment distorts perception. If inner wealth is your practice, you must guard your attention like treasure. Not rigidly, wisely. Say no earlier. Clarify expectations sooner. End draining loops faster. Protect the hours where your future is built. A profound shift happens when you stop seeing boundaries as rejection and start seeing them as architecture. They're the walls that allow a temple to hold sacred fire. Now let's talk about pace. Sovereignty has rhythm. Scarcity oscillates between frenzy and collapse. Overwork, burnout, avoidance, guilt, repeat. Wealth identity favors sustainable intensity, focused effort, deliberate rest, recalibration, continuation. This rhythm compounds. Over months, the person who honors rhythm outperforms the person addicted to adrenaline because calm consistency beats chaotic heroics. In practical terms, before major decisions, do not decide from peak fear or peak euphoria. Decide from regulated clarity. If needed, delay by one night, breathe, walk, write the facts, and revisit. A regulated decision today can save a year of repair. Writing itself is another alchemical tool. Remember the sacredness of inscription. When thoughts churn, externalize them. 2 columns can change a day. Scarcity story and sovereign response. Let the first speak honestly, then answer from your chosen identity. Not with fake positivity, with grounded truth. Example, scarcity story. If this client says no, I'm finished. Sovereign response. One outcome does not define my trajectory. I will improve my offer, follow up with 3 prospects, and continue. This converts emotional fog into executable clarity. Your environment matters too. State is contagious. Spend enough time around chronic cynicism and your imagination shrinks. Spend enough time around disciplined creators and your standards rise naturally. Choose proximity like medicine. This is not elitism. It is ecology. A seed's potential depends partly on soil. There is a spiritual nuance here. Surrender and sovereignty are not opposites. You govern what is yours, attention, interpretation, action, and surrender what is not. Timing, other people's choices, the exact route of outcomes. Scarcity either tries to control everything or gives up entirely. Sovereignty does neither. It participates fully and releases compulsive control. This paradox is one of the highest forms of inner wealth. In this phase, you will still have days where old patterns surge. Maybe a single message triggers abandonment fear. Maybe a market shift triggers survival memory. Maybe exhaustion lowers your resilience. When this happens, avoid the second arrow, self-attack about having a reaction. Just return. Return to breath. Return to posture. Return to language. Return to one clear action. Return again tomorrow. Repetition is the real ritual. If you keep returning, people around you begin to feel something different. Your presence steadies rooms. Your words carry less charge and more precision. You negotiate better because you are less desperate. You create better because you are less fragmented. You listen better because your mind is not constantly defending itself. These changes are subtle but enormous. They are the invisible infrastructure of outer success. And there is magnificence in this, if you let yourself see it. Not performative magnificence, not glitter, but the grandeur of a human being refusing to be ruled by old fear. The grandeur of someone who can feel uncertainty and still act nobly. The grandeur of choosing coherence on an ordinary Tuesday when no one is watching. This is spiritual royalty without spectacle. Imagine once more that inner chamber, but now the scale has changed. On one side rests circumstance, with all its unpredictability. On the other rests your cultivated state. At first, circumstance was heavier. Now, slowly, through breath, body, language, imagination, boundary, rhythm, and disciplined return, your state gains mass. One day you notice it. Events still move, but they no longer throw you as far. The center holds. When the center holds, wealth can approach without startling your system. Opportunity can arrive without triggering immediate self-doubt. Visibility can increase without identity fracture. You can receive praise without inflation and criticism without collapse. You can stay in process long enough for compounding to reveal its quiet genius. This is feeling state sovereignty, not a mood trick, a way of being, a covenant with your own becoming. And as this covenant deepens, your next step becomes unavoidable. If you can govern your state, then you must let that state incarnate in behavior. Not someday, not when proof arrives. Now, in choices so small they seem insignificant, and so consistent they become destiny. Once sovereignty becomes more than theory, life asks for proof in a different language. Not emotion, not insight, behavior. You can breathe beautifully, journal honestly, visualize with precision, and still remain unchanged if your daily choices keep voting for the old identity. This is the threshold where many sincere people hesitate because action exposes allegiance. It reveals what you truly believe about yourself. To act as the already anointed is not to pretend you have arrived at the final summit. It is to move as someone entrusted with future weight. It is to carry yourself as a steward before the treasury is full, to honor standards before applause, to treat your work and your word as sacred before anyone calls them important. In ancient imagery, anointing was not decoration. It was consecration for responsibility. The oil on the forehead signified, this one is set apart for alignment between power and integrity. Modern life asks the same thing without the ceremony. Can you hold higher standards before external reward compels you? This is where inner wealth meets the floorboards of ordinary days. The old identity says, I'll organize myself when I'm successful. The anointed identity says, organization is one way I become trustworthy with success. The old identity says, I'll take care of my body when things calm down. The anointed identity says, my body is the instrument through which all outcomes are made. The old identity says, I'll communicate clearly when I feel confident. The anointed identity says, clear communication is how confidence is built in the real world. Notice how everything shifts from mood-based to principle-based. That one shift changes destiny. Begin with the smallest arena, micro-decisions. A life is not transformed only by dramatic leaps. It is shaped by repeated moments where you either reinforce scarcity or encode sufficiency. You either postpone the important task again or complete one focus block. You either leave the hard message unsent or send a concise, respectful follow-up. You either keep a vague promise to yourself or keep a specific one. You either spend to numb anxiety or spend according to intention. You either say yes to something misaligned to avoid discomfort or say no with dignity. Each decision whispers to your nervous system, "This is who we are." People underestimate this whisper because it is quiet. But identity is not built by volume. It is built by repetition. Anointed behavior includes standards around time, because time is a sacred budget. Scarcity treats time like an emergency room. Everything urgent, nothing prioritized. The already anointed treats time like consecrated territory. There are hours for creating value, hours for recovery, hours for relationships, hours for silence. Not perfectly, but intentionally. You do not need a flawless calendar. You need an honorable relationship with attention. Drift is expensive. Presence compounds. Then there is the standard of finishing. Scarcity starts many things to soothe fear, but completes few things because completion invites exposure. Completion means being seen, judged, measured. So the old self delays at the edge of done. The anointed self learns to finish imperfectly and iterate publicly. A completed offering teaches you more than 10 hidden drafts. A ship project introduces you to real feedback. A closed loop builds internal trust. And internal trust is one of the purest forms of wealth. Another crucial behavior is financial dignity long before financial abundance. This may sound paradoxical, but it is practical mysticism. Financial dignity means you stop using money as emotional anesthesia. You track without shame. You plan without self-punishment. You reduce leaks not from fear, but from respect. You allocate for growth even if the amount is small. You pay attention because attention is love in practical form. When someone says, "I'm bad with money," they're often practicing identity protection. If you declare permanent incapacity, you avoid the discomfort of learning. But to be already anointed means you become teachable where you once felt doomed. You learn basic stewardship. You improve pricing. You negotiate where appropriate. You separate signal from noise. You stop calling avoidance intuition. And with money, as with everything, congruence matters more than theatrics. Luxury, signaling without inner stability, is just costume. Quiet stewardship with clear intention is true regality. Relationships reveal this shift even more starkly. Scarcity relates transactionally, seeking rescue, validation, advantage, or belonging at any cost. The already anointed relates from grounded reciprocity. You honor people's time. You communicate cleanly. You keep promises or renegotiate early. You express appreciation concretely. You ask directly instead of manipulating indirectly. You collaborate without collapsing your boundaries. Over time, this builds reputation. And reputation is invisible capital with enormous compound interest. Reputation, in this frame, is not image management. It is pattern memory in other people's nervous systems. Do others feel clarity around you or confusion? Reliability or volatility? Respect or extraction? If you want outer wealth that lasts, become someone whose presence lowers chaos. Now, there's a subtle practice here that transforms everything. Disciplined generosity. Not reckless giving, not martyrdom, not performative charity, disciplined generosity. This means circulating value even before you feel ready, because circulation counters scarcity hoarding. You share useful knowledge. You make thoughtful introductions. You encourage without flattery. You tip fairly when possible. You pay attention to where your resources, money, time, expertise, care can create real lift. Why does this matter spiritually and psychologically? Because scarcity says there is not enough, protect at all costs. Disciplined generosity says I am connected to flow and I act from sufficiency while honoring limits. It rewires your nervous system from defensive contraction to relational trust. It proves to your body that giving does not equal annihilation. It also refines discernment because mature generosity requires boundaries and wisdom, not guilt. Acting anointed also means raising your threshold for self-betrayal. This is a hard sentence, but it heals. Most long-term suffering is not from one catastrophic event. It is from repeated micro-betrayals tolerated as normal. Saying yes when you mean no. Accepting terms beneath your dignity repeatedly. Delaying conversations that would restore clarity. Ignoring bodily signals until burnout forces collapse. Laughing off disrespect to keep temporary peace. Every micro-betrayal teaches your system. Our truth is negotiable. Inner wealth cannot stabilize on that foundation. So you begin to practice micro-honoring instead. A truthful email sent sooner. A boundary voiced calmly. A standard clarified before resentment forms. A pause taken before agreeing. A night of sleep protected instead of sacrificed to panic work. These acts seem small. They are royal decrees in the kingdom of identity. There will be friction. Acting from the already anointed self can initially reduce short-term comfort. People who benefited from your old overgiving may resist. Environments built on confusion may not welcome clarity. Your own old habits may protest. This is too much, too strict, too serious. But this is not rigidity. It is alignment under construction. And alignment has a texture you can feel. Your days become less dramatic, more potent. Less frantic, more focused. Less performance, more presence. You stop needing constant emotional highs to trust your path. You become less impressed by intensity and more devoted to integrity. At work, this might look like preparing thoroughly before important conversations instead of improvising from anxiety. It might mean defining scope clearly so projects do not dissolve into chaos. It might mean creating systems so your income is not fully dependent on heroic last-minute effort. It might mean saying that timeline won't serve quality. Here's what will, even when your voice shakes slightly. Courage often sounds calm. In creative life, acting anointed means honoring craft. You revise. You study. You practice when no one is watching. You stop hiding behind potential and start producing substance. Potential is cheap without devotion. Devotion turns potential into contribution. In personal life, it means creating beauty and order where you live, even modestly. A clean corner, a cared-for desk, a morning light ritual, a nourishing meal prepared intentionally. Why does this matter? Because environment instructs identity. If your space communicates neglect, your nervous system receives neglect as baseline. If your space communicates respect, your system receives respect as normal. Anointed living is not about expensive aesthetics. It is about encoded reverence. Now we come to one of the most powerful behaviors of all, keeping your word to yourself. Many people would rather disappoint themselves than risk disappointing others, then wonder why self-trust is fragile. But self-trust is built exactly as social trust is built. Promise and fulfillment, repeated. Start small. One non-negotiable practice daily. Keep it, then expand. This is how the inner throne becomes stable. Without self-trust, strategy collapses under stress. With self-trust, even simple strategy becomes forceful. As this identity matures, results often begin to move more visibly. But paradoxically, you become less obsessed with immediate proof. Not because you care less, but because you understand law. You know behavior precedes momentum. You know standards precede stability. You know integrity precedes influence. You stop bargaining with the process and start partnering with it. And there is grandeur in this stage that outsiders rarely recognize. It is not loud. It is not viral. It is a grandeur of bearing. You walk into rooms with less apology. You speak with fewer decorative words. You listen for signal, not drama. You choose collaborators by character, not hype. You carry yourself like a custodian of something sacred, because you are. Imagine now a corridor in an ancient complex, walls lined with carved symbols of harvest, justice, stars, and scales. At the far end, a door stands closed. On it is no lock, only an inscription. Prove in action what you claim in spirit. Every day you approach this door, through choices. Every kept promise, every clear boundary, every finished task, every dignified conversation, every disciplined generosity, every moment of self-honoring. These are your knocks. Eventually the door opens not by miracle, but by congruence. And when it opens, you discover something surprising. You were never trying to convince the universe to bless you. You were becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with blessing. That realization prepares you for the final passage, the one most people abandon too soon. The sacred delay between seed and visible treasure, where faith is tested not by crisis, but by silence. Now you arrive at the chamber nobody can skip, the one that decides whether inner wealth becomes lived reality or remains a beautiful idea you once believed in for a season. It is not the chamber of vision. You have already seen. It is not the chamber of technique. You have already practiced. It is the chamber of delay. Delay is the interval where the old identity screams its loudest, because visible evidence has not yet fully caught up with invisible transformation. You have changed your breath, your posture, your language, your boundaries, your standards, your micro-decisions. You feel different. You move differently. Some results have appeared, yes, but maybe not enough yet to silence doubt. This is where many people panic and relapse into old patterns. They interpret delay as rejection, silence as failure, and temporary plateaus as proof that none of it works. But delay is not a void. Delay is an intelligence test of alignment. A seed does not break the surface the moment it is planted. First, it opens below ground in darkness. Its earliest victory is invisible. It must soften, split, and root before it rises. If you judged only by what is visible in the first days, you would call it dead. But life often does its most important work underground. Your inner wealth journey follows the same law. The first roots are often unseen. Better emotional recovery, cleaner decisions, fewer self-betrayals, steadier focus, wiser relationships, less panic spending, more strategic action. These are not small things. They are structural things. They do not always produce instant applause, but they make sustained abundance possible. Without structure, sudden gains collapse. With structure, slower gains endure. The scarcity mind hates this phase because it is addicted to immediate proof. It whispers, if this were real, you'd have everything by now. It compares your timeline to curated snapshots of other people's outcomes. It tries to bait you into desperate actions, overcommitting to bad deals, abandoning standards for quick money, returning to draining environments because they are familiar, scattering your attention across 10 methods because patience feels intolerable. The already anointed self answers differently. I do not dig up roots to check growth. I tend the soil. Tending the soil in delay means continuing aligned behavior when the emotional reward is low. It means respecting the process when novelty fades. It means holding your standard on ordinary days, not just inspired days. Anyone can feel powerful in a breakthrough week. Mastery is revealed in silent weeks. There's an advanced spiritual maturity here. You stop confusing speed with truth. Fast is not always faithful. Slow is not always wrong. Some manifestations are quick because conditions were already ripe. Others take time because they require character expansion, skill acquisition, relational realignment, or environmental shifts you cannot force. Delay can be protection from outcomes your current nervous system cannot yet hold cleanly. This is hard to hear when you are tired, but it can save you from expensive shortcuts. When silence stretches, return to measurement that matters. Not just external metrics, but formative metrics. Ask, am I recovering from setbacks faster than before? Are my decisions more coherent? Is my self-talk less catastrophic? Am I attracting cleaner opportunities, even if fewer? Are my boundaries stronger? Is my work quality rising? Do I trust myself more than last season? These are leading indicators. External wealth is often a lagging indicator. In this phase, faith is not blind belief that everything will magically work out. Faith is disciplined loyalty to inner law when outcomes are not yet obvious. Faith is behavioral continuity under uncertainty. Faith is saying, I refuse to become someone smaller just because results are late. And yes, you will meet grief here. Grief for years spent in old cycles. Grief for opportunities missed while you were afraid. Grief for versions of you that survived but did not thrive. Let grief move. Do not turn it into identity. Grief that is felt becomes depth. Grief that is suppressed becomes sabotage. You will also meet temptation disguised as practicality. Offers that promise immediate relief but cost long-term integrity. Relationships that soothe loneliness but erode standards. Strategies that inflate short-term numbers while draining your spirit. Delay makes these temptations louder because urgency narrows discernment. This is why your practices matter now more than ever. Breath before decisions. Clarity before commitments. Alignment before acceleration. One of the greatest protections in delay is devotion to craft. While waiting for larger outcomes, refine your instrument. Improve your communication. Upgrade your skills. Deepen your service. Strengthen your systems. Clean your operations. Simplify your process. Learn what your market, your audience, your work, and your soul are actually asking for. People who treat delay as apprenticeship emerge with power. People who treat delay as punishment emerge bitter. Another protection is community of congruence. Not crowds, not noise. One or two people who value truth over performance. People who can remind you of your trajectory when your mood forgets. People who won't let you romanticize old chaos. People who celebrate your integrity, not just your wins. Isolation amplifies distortion. Wise companionship restores proportion. And then there's trust in timing, which is often misunderstood as passivity. True trust in timing is active. You keep showing up, keep refining, keep choosing aligned action, while releasing obsession with exact arrival dates. You do not surrender effort. You surrender compulsion. You do not stop building. You stop bargaining. Bargaining sounds like this. I did the work for 3 months. Where's my reward? But life is not a vending machine. It is a living field of cause, readiness, relationship, and rhythm. Some outcomes require a threshold of consistency before they stabilize. If you quit one day before the threshold, you will call the law false when you simply exited too early. There's a phrase worth engraving inwardly. Latency is not absence. Latency means the result exists in process before it exists in view. This is true in biology, technology, finance, art, and spirit. Compounding is invisible until it is undeniable. Your job is to remain coherent during invisibility. As you do, something profound happens. The emotional drama around outcomes begins to soften. You still care deeply, but your identity is no longer hostage to weekly fluctuations. You stop riding every wave like it is final judgment. You become harder to shake. You become easier to trust. You become the person opportunities can safely land on. And then, often in a way that feels both surprising and inevitable, the visible world starts to confirm what you have been becoming. A conversation turns into a contract. A consistent practice turns into recognition. A refined offer finds the right market. A relationship built on clarity becomes a meaningful collaboration. Income patterns stabilize. Creative flow deepens. Your days gain a different texture. Less emergency, more intention. When this happens, do not forget the law. Do not worship the fruit and neglect the root. Keep the inner chamber clean. Keep the practices alive. Keep humility with power. Keep generosity with boundaries. Keep stewardship with growth. Outer wealth without inner governance eventually becomes noise. Outer wealth with inner governance becomes legacy. And legacy, in this frame, is not just what you leave behind materially. It is what your presence teaches others is possible. When you embody inner wealth through delay, people feel permission to stop panicking and start aligning. They learn that abundance can be ethical, grounded, and deeply human. They learn that spirituality and strategy are not enemies. They learn that sovereignty is not coldness, it is care with backbone. At the far edge of this path, you realize the treasure was never only money, though money matters and can do great good. The deeper treasure is authorship. You no longer live as a reaction to history. You live as a conscious participant in becoming. You can meet uncertainty without surrendering dignity. You can pursue ambition without abandoning soul. You can receive without clinging and give without depletion. You can move through silence without collapsing your faith. This is the code. Not believe and wait. Become and continue. Not force and fear. Align and steward. Not, I'll feel rich when results appear. I embody well so results can trust me. You're no longer asking life for permission to feel resourced. You are practicing resourcefulness as identity. You are no longer begging timing to validate your worth. You are honoring worth as the ground from which right timing is received. You're no longer hypnotized by the gap between now and next. You are building the bridge daily with breath, language, boundary, devotion, and coherent action. And as you cross, you notice the paradox that began this journey has become your lived reality. By feeling rich before results, you did not escape reality. You finally entered it at a deeper level where cause is formed. So keep going. Keep the chamber lit. Keep the inscription clean. Keep your standards kind and firm. Keep your offerings honest. Keep your pace dignified. Keep your heart available. Let delay ripen you, not harden you. Let success refine you, not inflate you. Let your life become a text future generations can read when they, too, stand in the silence between seed and treasure. Because one day someone will ask how you held steady when nothing seemed certain, how you stayed generous when fear was fashionable, how you built wealth without losing your soul. And you will not need a slogan. Your life itself will answer. The night is quieter now. The frantic pulse that once governed every choice has softened into a deeper rhythm, like distant drums beneath desert stars. You're not at the end of desire, not at the end of work, not at the end of becoming. But you're no longer wandering without a map. You have walked through fog, through mirrors, through old echoes that once sounded like destiny, and you have learned to hear something truer beneath them, the steady voice of inner law. Maybe your outer world is still rearranging as these words settle into your bones. Maybe some doors are still closed. Maybe numbers are still catching up. Let them. You're no longer measuring your life only by what can be counted this week. You are measuring by coherence, by courage, by the quiet integrity of choices that no one applauds, but that change everything. Tonight, breathe like one who is entrusted. Sit like one who belongs in their own life. Speak to yourself as if your words are inscriptions on stone, because they are. Walk tomorrow as if each ordinary decision is part of a larger ceremony, because it is. Send a message. Finish the page. Honor the boundary. Refine the craft. Keep the promise you made to yourself when no one was watching. If fear returns, and it will sometimes, greet it without surrender. If delay stretches, and it may tend the soil. If success arrives quickly, receive it with humility. If success arrives slowly, receive the training hidden in the wait. In both cases, remain who you decided to become. You were never asked to be perfect. You were asked to be faithful to alignment. Again and again, breath by breath, choice by choice, season by season. The chamber is still lit. The scale is still balanced. The script is still being written. And now, with steadier hands and a clearer heart, You continue writing it.